Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Book Slam Extra. I'm your host, Jules. I do hope you're okay and you have had a lovely week. My week has been good, so thank you very much for asking. I have actually been creating some stories in my head which have yet to make it onto paper. But I have also been trying to come up with ideas for my third book in my first series. So anyway, in case you didn't know me, I am an author. I write dark fantasy, science fiction, science fantasy, and I write both young adult and adult books as well as children's books as well. Dabble in a bit of poetry every now and again, but I wouldn't call myself a poet because there's some very good ones out there. I'm mediocre at best. Um, I also do this every week. We've now started doing some exciting ones. So Adam and I do Sunday ones once a month, which we've got another one coming up this weekend. So I'm looking forward to that one. And I think Reese is going to be joining us for that one too. Possibly the lovely Melanie as well, otherwise known as The Voice. And what else? We had an amazing time last weekend. We actually did our very first After Dark show, which was I'm not sure. I was drinking. I think I got a little bit drunk because the wine went to my head. I'm not very good with wine. But I did enjoy it. It was a good laugh. It was a girly one as well, actually, because Adam wasn't able to join us for that one. But hopefully he's able to join us for the next one and be just as girly because we have Queen Talk in it, which is also a very interesting segment. Um, and what else do I do? I also do publishing as well, so which I've got some books in the works that are in the process of being published, and so watch this space for those. And I also run a Discord server, which is very small in its infancy at the moment, but it is specifically for writers, poets, authors, people who are like-minded within that community, to be able to just provide specific support to do with writing, share memes, share funny anecdotes, provide support, and whatever else they feel that they need. Other than that, I am going to straight away get my two lovely co-hosts on so they can introduce themselves to you, and then we're going to crack on with the show. So welcome to I'm gonna try and do this. I'm gonna be terrible at this now with all the technology. 1 second. Let's see who I'll go first. I'll go Adam first because I normally do Reese first. Hi, Adam.
Hello.
And the lovely Reese. Hi.
Hey. Oh no, Reese, you're
Hey.
muted. You're
Reese
muted.
is muted. Yeah,
There
there
we
you
go.
go. How are you both doing?
Great, great.
Good, good. Glad to hear it.
You sound like you've got a whole lot of projects going on that you're working on as far as writing as well as other things.
I because of the work that I do, I actually it gives me quite an ample opportunity to do a lot of thinking. However, not as much time writing. So I have lots of ideas in my head, not so much on paper. But it will get there. It's, Now, you've got some projects, both of you, haven't you, that you're working on?
Yes,
Did you
indeed.
want to introduce yourselves? Adam, would you like to go first? We normally do Reese first, but I'm going to be, equality and all that. Let's go for Adam first this time.
Sure. Hi, I'm Adam Andrews Johnson. I have a brand new book that's just come out, the Mantis variant. There it is. There's the cover, Mantis variant. I'm excited about this. It is a dark fantasy dystopian horror / all that kind of stuff together. It takes place in a future that is sort of terrible, and it starts in a cult, and there are people hunting other people, and it's very exciting. I love it, and I've gotten some good responses about it, so I'm happy. It's on Amazon. It's on Kindle. If you'd like a signed copy, I have physical copies. I can actually send you if you'd like that. Let's see. I've also Jules mentioned that she has a publishing company. I am releasing a massive high epic fantasy novel that really focuses on the subject of human sexuality in a major way, both in an erotica and a celebration of kinks and that sort of thing, but also in a celebration of the spectrum of queer people, LGBTQAI plus everybody. There are many transgender important characters there. I'll give away a spoiler here. The main character is a guy, and he runs through the entire story and comes out as non-binary at the end after having a lot of experiences with a lot of other people, and that's a very important focus of the whole story. Him coming into terms with himself and learning that he doesn't have to be he can move on and be they. They actually come up with their own pronouns at that point in the end of the story, and that's sort of the beginning of a new adventure that will be book 2. So that's where I am. I've got a lot working on, and I'm also writing a little something scary and creepy with Jules on the side, which is really exciting. We've been doing that for a little while, and and we're hosting a writing competition, which we'll talk about later, but I want to make sure that we mention that because that's important too. But we need to introduce Reese because we love Reese. So that's enough about me.
Oh, hang on, Reese, you're really quiet. You sound like you're like a million miles away from the microphone.
I think it's my headset. Let me see if it wants to cooperate today. Because for some weird reason, it doesn't want to. It's being weird.
Gotta love technology.
Super.
At least mine's working this week. Last week, mine didn't work at all.
It has been a weird day. It's been a weird day trying to get this thing connected, but I still don't think it's connected. Can y'all hear me?
I've turned my computer up on the highest setting, so I can hear you, but it just means when other people talking, they're going to be shouted. But at least your voice can be heard. So yeah.
Because I just realized I may have to switch headsets again. But
oh, that's all right, don't worry.
I got a big mouth. We can make it work. So without further ado, hi everybody. I'm Reese, aka Reese the Storyteller. I am an author of my debut novel, Trapped. Yeah, right there. And I am actually in the process of working on the sequel. So will be released in the summer of 2023. So I've got that going. What other projects am I working on? I've got we're doing our spooky release with our short stories. That will be posted on YouTube. So stay tuned for that. We got that coming.
I haven't mentioned that yet. Well, we can talk about that. I know.
So we got that coming up. I actually am preparing for a book fair on Saturday in New Orleans. So I will be at City Park for Black Ink Book Festival this Saturday from 11 to 3. If you're in the area, come hang out, bring the kids out. There's a little bit for everybody. It is free, but there is a sign up on Eventbrite. So go to Eventbrite, grab your tickets. Come on out. They're doing a book giveaway. They're doing tote bag giveaways. They're supposed to have a DJ out there. It's supposed to be a whole little party going on. So definitely come and check us out. Of course, come get your book. Come get your book signed. But so far, yeah, just plugging along, trying to get the next piece done. It's so funny. I was talking to an author friend of mine last night, and she and I were bouncing ideas off of each other for this book cover idea that she's doing. And I mocked up her book cover within 10 minutes on Canva last night, just from the idea that she gave me. So I've been kind of teeter-tottering along with some things, but yeah, it's been a process. It's been a process, but hey, productive year. Just won another book award from Firebird book contest. I won an award for erotica for my book. So hey, Trapp's 3 times award winning at this particular point.
It's amazing. That is so amazing. And that must make you feel so just, excited and really engaged with the whole writing process.
Definitely. It's one of those things that when you're doubting yourself when it comes down to your ability, you're doubting yourself when it comes down to how people are receiving your work, you really kind of get in your own head sometimes. We are our worst critics, specifically being authors, because just like Jules says a lot, it's a lonesome road. You are your own worst enemy because you're the one that's creating these worlds and these characters. So yeah, it gets kind of crazy, but when you get that validation, it's just eye opening. It's eye
Yeah,
opening.
that affirmation has got to feel so good. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, we're starting off the year right. Let's keep going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So should we tell them a little bit about what you mentioned just a moment ago?
Yes. Yes.
What about another project that we're working on? Did you want to talk about it, or do you want me to?
Oh, you can.
I don't mind because you're the one who mentioned it. So,
well, we've got a horror project we're working on, and we were trying to do this quarterly, right? So as far as our little scary stories that we're developing, and I did get a chance to listen to some of Melanie's the other night. I wanna replay it tonight so I can listen to the whole thing. It's so good, y'all.
really
y'all, it's coming. We've got our Dark Winding Road is going to be the first segment of this series. So you get a chance to listen to these little black screen videos. Some people listen to them while before they go to sleep. Jules is one of those people.
Oh yeah, I am.
So
bring out the big screen.
Yes. I feel like it's going to be a fun project for us to work on. So yeah, so keep an eye out for that, guys. We got some good things coming your way.
Absolutely, and we're hoping that once that we've had a few of those go out, that if people want us to read their story, then possibly that could be something that we could look at in the future, where we have people submit their stories and we read it, and then it gets put out as a black screen story, which means that people can listen to their story whilst they're sleeping. So yeah, so it's a very exciting time at the moment, and we also have a really really lovely guest as well today, Adam. Would you like to introduce them? I'm going to invite them onto the screen. So bear with me a moment.
Welcome.
Hi.
So you have to unmute yourself first.
Yes, I can't do it for you.
Well, then thank you. And will you tell us how to pronounce your name, please?
Qualia.
Qualia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
You're so welcome. I love your name. That's just such a cool name. I really love that name. Qualia.
Thanks. Yeah, it means a lot to me. Qualia is a psychological term or a philosophical term, which means the unique essence of an individual experience. So while four of us could be having this conversation right now, we're each going to get a unique subjective experience out of it based on our own individual lives. So it means a lot to me. Like, that's something I try to think about all the time when interacting with other human beings, is that we're all coalescing this reality together.
That's amazing. Wow.
Awesome.
That's really
good. Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your writing?
Sure, yeah. I've been writing for 30 years. Silly little stories and poems as a child and an adolescent. I started writing a lot of literary fiction when I was a paramedic with the local ambulance service. Then I decided I didn't want to write anything super, super serious based on my life because it just felt like trauma dumping. So now I want to write stories that make me happy and make me just kind of relaxed and excited, taking that fun element of storytelling. I want it to be fun. The writing that I used to do, it was very, very healing in that it helped me like work through a lot of the stuff that I had seen and been a part of. But now I want to be a writer that writes things that people just enjoy, kind of pulp fiction-y, dime store novels that just give people a smile, or maybe more than that, but at least, stuff that people enjoy, and it doesn't have to have an intense amount of deep personal subjective experience for me. I want it to be more relatable. And then when I became a parent a couple of years ago, I really started getting interested in writing for a younger audience as well. So I just recently started branching into fantasy. So I've written a kind of a somewhat unique novel, I think, that should be coming out soon. And it's a sort of mix between like a Studio Ghibli kind of fantasy world mixed with like steampunk, mixed with a multiversal empire sci-fi, and
Wow.
aimed at the 12 to
Nice.
16 age range. So really excited about that one. It was started out as a project to see if I could write like that, and I ended up really liking it. I was always really inspired by Studio Ghibli movies and how they make me feel very like comforted. They weave in a lot of things about like environmentalism and finding chosen family and things like that that are really important to me. So I like the idea. I think one of the things that I really liked about Studio Ghibli movies and the novels, which some of them are based on, is that you don't have to write down to young audiences. You can write very intelligent and adult themed things to children, and they quite easily get it if you aren't condescending to them. So that's like a huge side project for me, if I can call it a side project. I have one novel written that, like I said, should be coming out soon, and then I think I'm going to try to write more in that genre as well. But I can't seem to stop writing, and I love that.
That's awesome.
Written some of the main thing that I'm writing right now is a sci-fi uh, universe that's been in my head for a long time, and it started out in 2018-ish, when one of my favorite musicians unfortunately took his own life. And
Hmm.
I decided I was going to write a sci-fi story where he didn't take his life. And so in the far, far future, he is reborn along with every human being who ever lived, uh, as part of humanity's universal colonization projects. They ran short on the numbers, so they bring back every human being that's ever lived to
God.
help populate the galaxy. And
Wow.
so it was originally this like kind of swashbuckling indie rocker who was flying around in space, kind of like a mix between like a rock concert and the TV show Firefly, with lots of funny, sexy adventures. And then I actually was doing a Twitter writing prompt one day, and somebody showed this like really cool picture of like a kind of a black hole, wormhole in space, and somebody kind of like staring longingly at it. And that started this story that ended up like I wrote it in one go. It was just like a couple of pages called The Final Kiss. And I just, for whatever reason, used the name that I had used from some of the notes about this universe that was slowly taking shape. And originally, the character Esmeralda was going to be this like holographic computerized girl that was a side kind of a background character in the main stories. But the more I wrote about her, the more she demanded to be front and center. So she's kind of become the main character of the whole thing. And I'm just so excited about her. She started out her life as this like android assassin who worked for this royal family on a planet in the distant future, and then after her world is destroyed in a war, she loses the love of her life, who was the princess of this planet. And I have a series of short stories that kind of all jumped from this original story, The Final Kiss. The six-part kind of short story series ended up being her like journey back to life of like how do we deal with loss and grief and incorporate that
Mm.
into our being to kind of find our way in the universe again when everything we thought was important to us has been taken away. And so it kind of just started from there. And so that series, the final part six comes out February 1st. And then I have a novel that I wrote that is these six stories kind of act as the prequel to the novel. So the novel comes out later this year. And then I've got got a lot of different novels that'll all kind of tie in. Some of them directly to like a main story continuity, and then some will just be like fun one-offs and stuff like that.
Do you have a website where all this stuff is located, or can we get it from Amazon or?
Yep,
Where?
you can get it for the 6th that'll be out starting February 1st. They're all accessible anywhere you would want to buy an ebook, so Amazon, Google Play, Apple Books, Smashwords, anything like that. And I do have a website as well that I can put in the chat. It's just
Yeah.
luckily if you just basically Google Quellia Read on the first one.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Pop that in the chat and we'll put it on the screen so that anybody can have access to that at some point. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you got such complex worlds going on. This is awesome. I love what you've just told us all about.
I love storytelling. You know, it's something that I've worked on my whole life. And you know, I tell people often, you know, one of the biggest pieces of writing advice I could ever give somebody is don't let other people tell you you suck, because you take that deep. And I think I had a girlfriend when I was about 19 that was very upset that I was always writing. As you know, many of our partners end up becoming when we're squirreled away in a corner, writing for hours on end. But I just, you know, at 19, I had no self-esteem, and so I internalized that, and I stopped writing for most of my 20s.
Oh.
And looking back now at 40, I kick myself about that a lot, because I was like, I'd be 10 years up on the game, right?
Hindsight's 20/20 vision, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And I did,
no.
you know, one of the things that stopped me from writing when I was really young was kind of the, you know, beat poet opinion that you have to get out there and live life before you can write about life. And so I've lived a very wide experience range life, been a paramedic, I've been a hospice nurse, I've been a floor nurse at hospitals.
Wow.
Now I'm a parent, so I've traveled quite a bit all throughout the world. And now I'm actually looking at getting my master's degree in counseling so that I can be
Wow.
sort of a trans non-binary resource for people in my area. And look
That's
forward to kind of
amazing.
building my own kind of healing counseling practice while also parenting and trying to get as many novels out as possible.
Amazing, amazing. And do you want to tell us what area you're in so that people can sort of
Sure.
be in contact
Yeah.
with you?
Yeah, I live on the west coast of Canada right now on a little island called Vancouver Island, which is, I guess, not a tiny island. It's one of the biggest islands in the world, but it's lovely. It's fairly rural. Yeah, it's where I live and live in
Awesome.
this house and raise our little toddler together.
Wonderful. We mentioned earlier we're doing a writing competition right now. We're hosting, and the end result is one of the end results is that the published work that we're going to release, 15% of the proceeds is going to a local, a national nonprofit called the Trevor Project that helps with suicide prevention in the LGBTQ community, specifically with youth. Project. Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. So that's awesome. I feel like we've set up a really safe space here for people to come and be themselves. So I'm so glad to hear that you're doing the exact same thing where you are. You know, that's so awesome. That's so awesome. And I hope people in your area
make me feel quite safe right now.
Pardon me?
I said you all make me feel safe right now, so that's very much appreciated.
Yay! Wonderful. We're so glad to have you, and we're so casual. We're just hanging. We just hang out and do this thing, and like we all love talking about writing. So, and like we've all already said, like I think every single person has said, it's such a solitary process that it's really nice to just have other writers to connect to in particular. So, yeah.
Definitely. What's really cool is, you know, we all actually have, if nothing else other than the writing, we all have the LGBTQ in common in some aspect, one way or another. You know, and so there is a link there, I think, that helps people feel safe and secure within a community that actually really understands and gets it. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I love it. I love meeting new authors, and I love meeting authors who've been really established, and love meeting just new people and just, you know, building a community, and that's what we're trying to do. So yeah, so welcome. Now we do have Jahara as well.
The Jahara show.
So we can invite.
She was going to join us as well. Yay!
I'll invite her on. Hang on a second.
We're gonna add her into our support group.
We're all really tiny. We're all really tiny. I wish we could make it so that like we were all bigger. Hello, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Great.
Good.
Good.
It's so nice to see you again. So lovely to have you back on.
Yeah.
Well,
Would you like to?
on.
Oh, sorry.
Pardon, sorry.
I said I'm very honored to come back on.
Oh, great. No, our pleasure. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your writing for anybody who didn't see you last time you were on last year?
Sure. I'm Johar Harper. I write YA fantasy with a lot of queer representation. I have 7 published books now.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
I published The Realm of Monsters on Halloween, last Halloween.
Oh.
So
Yes.
Right, that's what you were talking about.
yeah, because I read a snippet from the book that was going to come out because it was up for pre-order at the time. And I've been working on the sequel to that a lot. So
Excellent. Excellent.
Nice.
Cool.
Now you know the drill, don't you, in terms of the reading and things like that. So are you happy to do some reading today for us?
yeah.
Because I think it'd be quite nice. I mean, you don't have to, Qualia. If you'd like to go first, then you are very welcome to. But Jahara's been on before, so she knows what she is expected of us. So she'll be on the full screen. So it depends on how comfortable you are with that initially.
I'll let you go first.
That's great. Yeah. So we'll all in a second we'll all pop off the screen. Jahara will be on by herself. We'll all be muted at that point, and Jahara, you can read for 10-15 minutes, whatever feels good to you, a nice chunk of time, and then when you're done, just let us know, and we'll all pop back in and come back to chat with you. Does that sound good?
Yeah, lovely. All right, okay. Right, hang on. Indy's in the background as well, so
Hi, Indy.
I'm going to try and do it so that we're going off fairly quickly. Right, hang on. I'll take you off first, Qualia. Hang on a second.
Okay. So the sequel to Realm of Monsters is called The Vampire's Creation, and I will be reading from chapter 7. The door slowly creaked open. Kalista and Pisistratos both revealed their fangs as they prepared for a fight. Kalista took out her daggers as Pisistratos took out his sword. Once the door opened, they both charged, but stopped abruptly when they saw who stepped out of the shadows. Atlas. Kalista's eyes darted toward Pisistratos, but he couldn't take his eyes off of him. Atlas quickly walked inside and shut the door behind him. "What are you doing here?" Atlas's voice was in a harsh whisper. Pisces sheathed his sword, but Kalista held on to her daggers. She wouldn't kill him because she knows how it feels to watch the love of her life being murdered before her very eyes, and she didn't want him to feel that pain again, not after he just got Atlas back. But she had trust issues and needed a security to protect herself in case things went wrong. "We came to send our friends through Caleb's portal," PC's voice was shaky, "to help our other friends." "That was incredibly dangerous, PC's," Alice exclaimed. "You care?" "Of course I care. Aren't you mind-controlled or something?" "No, it's not like that." "Then what is it like?" Pisistratos asked. "I had to save you," Alice replied, "and this was the only way." "We should take this elsewhere," Kalista interrupted. "You have to go," Alice told them, "before Caleb finds you. Go." "I'm not leaving you," Pisistratos told him. "I can't." Alice wiped a few tears away. "He promised he'd ensure your safety if I did as he said." "Caleb doesn't understand honor nor loyalty," Kalista told him. "He wouldn't think twice about killing Pisces, whether he promised you or not." Pisistratos walked toward Alice, taking his hands in his. They were so close. Alice could feel Pisistratos' hot breath. Looking up, Alice met his dark eyes. His heart pounded in his chest. He missed being this close to him. "I'm not leaving without you," Pisistratos told him. "It's dangerous." "It's nothing we haven't faced before," Alice sighed. "I don't know. I know you're trying to protect me. So much of our story is just protecting each other, PC Stratos explained. But there comes a time when the best way to protect each other is just by being together and facing problems as a united front, rather than making decisions that affects us both on your own. Alice contemplated what PC Stratos said. He had a point. Alice couldn't deny that, but he has spent centuries knowingly helping the bad guy to protect the love of his life from harm. Does he know how to turn that switch off, to go with PCs and be free? Calista looked out the window and saw several vampires talking and checking the perimeters. She had sheathed one dagger but held tightly onto the other hand, just in case. She moved away from the window and toward the door, checking if anyone was out there. It was clear, for now, they needed to get out of there. What will Caleb do if I go with you? Alice asked. You could be in danger. I don't think he would go out of his way to kill me, PC Stratos replied. He's too obsessed with Calista. You two may have a long past with him, Alice commented, but I'm the one that's been by his side the past 1,000 years. Talking gets us nowhere, Calista interrupted, garnering their attention. We must be going. Look, Alice, you have to do what you think is right, PC Stratos told him, and so do I. Alice squeezed his hand. I am not leaving without you. Never again, PC Stratos continued. So if you stay, then fine. I'm staying too. Alice shook his head. PCs. You can't change my mind any more than I can change yours. I can't lose you, PCs. I already lost you, and it nearly broke me. Alice looked down. I can't go through that pain again, not after everything. He had tears in his eyes that he had tried to blink away, but failed. Alice held back his own tears. Shaking his head, he placed both hands on either side of his face, calming PC Stratos immediately. Alice used his thumbs to wipe away the remaining tears. You won't lose me, Alice reassured. I'm here, and I'm never leaving you again. So you're coming with us? Absolutely. They were about to kiss when Calista pulled them apart. Her fangs were out, her eyes red. Both daggers were back in her hands, her eyes scanning the quiet room. PC Stratos and Alice locked eyes as PC's got nervous. He knew Calista, and he knew that something was going down by the way she was acting. How do we get out of here undetected? Calista asked. I know a secret passage to the roof, Alice replied. Lead the way. The door flew open, causing PC Stratos and Alice to jump, revealing a group of vampires. They bared their fangs as they got ready to attack. Calista ran and stabbed two immediately. Now, Calista exclaimed, go! What about you? PC Stratos asked. I'm right behind you, Calista replied. Alice pulled a lever on the wall, which was a torch, as the fireplace moved, revealing an opening in the way. He took PC Stratos' hand and ran through the secret passageway. He looked behind and saw Calista fighting a dozen vampires on her own. Calista kicked a vampire in the chest as he fell backwards. One grabbed her from behind and she headbutted him. She grabbed him and flipped him over her, then broke his neck. One charged and flew at her, and she stabbed him in the throat with one of her daggers. Two vampires ran at her from either side, and she threw her daggers at them as she stared forward, both daggers hitting them in the hearts. Another ran toward her, and she grabbed his throat, pushing him up against the wall. She sensed one behind her and took another dagger out of her belt and stabbed him in the heart without even turning around. Her nails dug into the vampire's throat, blood being drawn. With one swift movement from her hand, she broke his neck. She took a step back and looked at the dead vampires surrounding her. She had blood on her outfit and skin from all the time she stabbed these vampires. She took the daggers out of the dead bodies and put them in her belt, where she kept them. Then she walked through the passage, closing it behind her. Alice dragged PC Stratos through the passageway, never stopping nor slowing down. PC Stratos kept looking back, hoping to see Calista, but each time was disappointed. But he knew she could take care of herself. She's the most capable person he knows. She'll be okay. Alice stopped abruptly and opened a trap door that was above them. Alice turned into a bat and flew out, turning back into himself, his feet landing on the roof. PC Stratos did the same thing. They both waited anxiously. We have to go, PCs. Just like I couldn't leave you, I can't leave her either, PC Stratos told him. She's my friend. Just then, a bat flew up the trapdoor and transformed into Calista, her hands on her hips. She held her head high, bloody daggers displayed on her belt, blood on her clothes and skin, as if she was just in the center of a battlefield. Did you kill everyone? Alice asked. Hardly, Calista replied. Only a couple dozen. Alice's eyes widened. All by yourself. PC Stratos chuckled. You don't know Calista. Are you done chatting? Good. We have to go. Calista walked to the edge to the roof. Now. She turned into a bat and flew off to the night sky. PC, Stratos, and Alice locked eyes before transforming into bats and followed her. Down below, Caleb watched them from a window, a couple dead vampires behind him. I'm done.
Sorry. I clicked the wrong button. Hang on a second.
Yay! Thank you so much for reading. That was marvelous. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, look how we're organized on the screen. This is fabulous. We're like all square. That's good.
I know. I pressed the wrong button. I ended up with a happy accident. So,
Well, Johara, that was fabulous. Your characters. Can you tell us a little bit about the different? Is it a vampire and a vampire hunter? What's going on? It was so awesome.
So there's a bunch of different types of monsters in the story. In this chapter, it was mostly just vampires, but you do get plenty of other types of creatures. They went into the enemy's house because they needed it to get a couple of their friends back to the monster realm, because they found out that a couple of their friends from the monster realm were in trouble and they needed help. So they were trying to do that. But then obviously they got caught while doing that. So there was a whole bloodbath that happened. But it wasn't a complete loss, because they did get their friends there and they were able to save one of their boyfriends. So
Awesome. Yep. It was very exciting. The chemistry between the characters and then the violence, the transition was so great. Sorry, Jules wants to say something. I keep interrupting.
No, you're fine. I was actually just going to say a very similar thing, that the chemistry between the characters is very palpable. Regardless of anything that's happened before, there's some sort of sexual tension going on. And what I was thinking was quite nice, because our theme tonight is talking about sex and relationships, so it kind of fits in beautifully with our theme. So obviously I don't know what goes on in the rest of the book, but would you like to tell us a little bit more about what happens with these characters? I mean, like you said, there's other people in the background that they have relationships with and stuff like that. How does it work? What's happening?
Well, Kalista is the main character, and the enemy is Caleb, and he's the main villain. And they have a long bad past. But so tensions are always rising between them. But between PC, Stratos, and Atlas, they had relations for some of these characters have been around for literal thousands of years, so
Right.
they do have a lot of history. And they have lots of history that I haven't even gotten into yet, because there's just so much to uncover. But with the two of them, they Alice had actually died, and so PC's chose, was obviously heartbroken over it. But what he didn't know was that Caleb had taken his body and turned him into a vampire. So they had only been reunited. They got reunited at the end of the Realm of Monsters. But Atlas was working for Caleb, and PC Stratos was all confused and conflicted and didn't know what to think or how to feel. He found out that the love of his life was alive all this time, but working with the enemy. So there's a lot of mixed things. But in this chapter, they finally have a confrontation without Caleb, being there. And he found out that Alice was basically doing all of this to save him, because Caleb had threatened him. So their entire life was trying to protect each other. But PCs, who had just gotten Alice back, was like, I'm gonna stay with you, I'm not leaving you again. So they decided to whatever happens, they'll figure it out together instead of being separated in this war like they had been in the past.
Wow.
That's such a rich history, and to not even know some of what's happened, because obviously you haven't even thought about it yet or written it. It shows you how much deep it goes, and how deep you've thought about it. It's fascinating. Now, What age range is it for? Just out of interest.
It's YA. I usually write YA. I'd say so. I mean, I guess it depends. I mean, it can go for just about any age if you ask me.
Yeah.
It doesn't get, sexual or anything, so it's okay for teenagers, but there can be some brutal scenes violence-wise, like you guys witnessed. So I guess it depends on just what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
The reason why I asked is because Carlia made a remark earlier about the fact that, children can read books that have quite complex things in it. And I agree completely. What they said, but I think probably the only two things that really separate it from being a children's story would be sex scenes and really like heavy swear words. I think sort of like the ones that we tend to use on a regular daily basis when you stub your toe, that kind of thing. That's part of it. I don't think they're an issue, but when you sort of like go into the more sort of more dangerous words, I think then that it kind of comes away from it being a more children type novel. But yes, I was just interested because it kind of links quite nicely to what Carly was saying. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, as long as they're okay with even the violent scenes, I don't feel like get too violent. But I don't have any swear words or any sex scenes, so I think it's good for kids. I mean, this book does get a bit darker than the first book, but still not in like a sexual sense. It's just Callista's past is pretty dark. She's been around for like 1,000 years, like I said, so there's like a lot about her past, and she's been through hell and back. I actually have a prequel trilogy planned once this one's done that delves more into her past because, like I said, there's just a lot to uncover. She's been through a lot, and a lot of her dark past comes from her relations with the villain Caleb. So, I mean, this book is called The Vampire's Creation because it kind of centers around finding out how vampires were originally created.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's
That's
like
really
a lot that hasn't been mentioned yet and stuff I still need to get to. I'm still rather early on in the book. So there's still so much that has to happen, and there's so much that has happened in the past that I probably still won't get to, at least in the original trilogy. I hope to get to in the prequel trilogy because, that 1,000 years, a lot can happen.
Yes. Well, and I want to jump back to something you said a second ago about it being sort of dark, but still being young adult friendly, YA friendly. That I've always been into dark stuff. Like even as a little kid, I owned, I don't know if you know, the Bunnicula books where there's like a bunny rabbit, but he's a vampire. Like it was for children.
That's so cool.
Nice.
There have always been like gateway horror for like, and I think that's important to have all the steps of the way. My book is horribly gruesome. It's not even for adults. It's for mature audiences because of how like gory and terrible and horror focused it is. But it requires other people writing not so gory things to lead up to it. You know what I mean? So it's important to have from the bunny rabbit vampire to the I think very because there are so many movies and TV shows that involve vampires and vampire blood, I think that is so acceptable. You writing that is nobody's going to question that. Oh yeah, the vampires and the blood. Okay, now what's the next scene? They're not going to be like, oh my God, it's so gory and horrible. I can't take it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's important to have that level so that they can like, ooh, this was great. I want something a little more next time. And you have I think that's important and that's so good. Yeah.
I think also that youngsters are quite capable of being able to discern from what's fiction and what's not. And when they read a book that we possibly might think is a bit old for them, actually, I think they just devour it. I don't think that they it's not like watching a movie. So you could probably pitch your book at young adult as well without it advertising it, Adam, to be fair. Because they love it. They love the gore. They love all of that kind of stuff. And you know, I would probably do you know the Point Horror series that came out? God, this is like the 1990s. So this was like the gateway horror that you were saying.
Yeah. Well, say the name
that,
again. I'm sorry.
That was probably Point Horror.
Point Horror.
It was like a whole series.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a whole series of books written by various horror authors, and you know, there was all about vampires and ghosts and zombies and people eating other people's faces and all that kind of stuff, and you know, and it was probably aimed at 15-year-olds, but 10, 9, 8-year-olds were reading it without any issue at all. So, you know, I don't know. I'm not convinced gore and horror. I mean, I suppose a 4-year-old probably not, but a 10, 11-year-old, I think, would be able to read your book without too much of an issue. They wouldn't get psychologically damaged from it because it's a story.
I also. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go on. It's okay.
I was just saying, I also think it depends on the person. Some people have more issues and they get more easily frightened or scared by stuff like that. And then there's some people that are more okay with it. Like, I've been watching horror my entire life. I do not remember a time when I really wasn't watching horror because I like it. You know, I'm okay. I've always been okay with the blood and the gore, and I never really scared that easy. But I also know people who scare rather easily and can't do horror. And they're around my age, and it's not bad to not be able to have it, to not be able to do it. You know, it just means it's not your thing. And so I think it. So I think younger people can experience it. It just depends on the person too.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I think if you're going to be interested in a particular like genre or style of writing, then you're going to sort of navigate towards those as opposed to sort of something else. So, and I think you're right. I think you know, I I listen to horror stories that are true life horror stories to go to sleep to. So, you know, whereas I know people in my family who like watching. There's a TV series called Midsummer Murders, which is like the most gentlest murder mystery show that you can possibly think of, and that is
PBS style.
Yeah, so it's just like, yeah, so I think it genuinely depends on the person and what their interests are. But yeah, it was just interesting because it kind of linked to what I was saying.
Somebody who's never been into horror, who's a full-grown adult, might want to read a young adult horror to be their first step into horror. You know what I mean? So it's awesome. That's awesome.
It's
like, absolutely.
When you first get into a genre, you want to go in, you know, like toes first, dipping into the water because you're not used to it. Like fantasy is my favorite genre, obviously, as you can probably tell. But if you want to get into fantasy, I'd suggest not getting into high fantasy first, just because that's kind of going into the deep end. So like,
it's very
deep.
Well, I think because it's got quite specific requirements to make it high fantasy. So if you look at all the subgenres that fall under both science fiction and fantasy, the requirements to be in specific genres is quite. So to write in high fantasy, there are a lot of authors and readers who have very specific expectations of what they are going to encounter. And if something falls outside of those and not within that, then it ends up not being high fantasy. So I agree with you. So it becomes really different.
Yeah, so I think it goes with just about any genre. You know, if you're getting into a genre for the first time, you should probably start something more on the softer side of that genre. Or you could get completely confused, not knowing what's happening, or it could be too much for you at first too, like going in from the deep end. So
yeah, the when I pitched my books, first of all, my first series, I aimed them more at young adult, and actually, the more I started writing them, there's aspects that happens to the main character, which is fairly traumatizing. And whilst it's kind of Hunger Games-ish in terms of like children dying, there's other things as well that happen that she really struggles with, like sexual assault. And it's it kind of went more into the dark fantasy genre. So I've actually leaned away from being pitched towards young adults, because although young adults might read it, actually it falls more outside of that specific remit. So yeah, and I think that's okay as well to change your genre as as you develop as an author. So
Well,
but yeah.
shall we Quelia, would you like to now jump on the screen and do some reading for us?
Well, I was just.
Sure,
Do you
I
mind if I
was-
just ask? Can I
Oh no, sorry,
interrupt?
go,
Sorry.
go, please. Jules, sorry, go.
We'll absolutely 100% hear you read as well. I'm really looking forward to what you're going to read. I just wanted to ask Jahara a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Oh, please, I'm sorry. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
It's all right, because we're talking. No, it's one of the things that we're talking about is relationships and sex. I know you said there isn't any sex in there because the sort of the age range that you're pitching it at, which I completely understand. But in terms of the connection that they have with each other, there's clearly a connection of some sort because of the amount of time they've known each other. How do you incorporate that in your writing? How do you show that or illustrate that through what you're saying, so that the reader can kind of get a feel for the longevity of their relationship that they've had?
I kind of I mean, some of it can be said in words, but I also have them sometimes there's so much said in the silence too, and the way they look at each other, the way they how they were holding back tears or couldn't help but to cry because there's just so much that hasn't been said over the course of the past 1,000 years or whatever, and the past several centuries since they've last seen each other, and just the little touches and the way they are around each other, how they're just, even though it has been a long time since they've really been this close, they're still comfortable with each other, it's still natural. So all those little things put together.
And how do you navigate that? Because obviously, because of their age, they would obviously be having a sexual relationship at some point in their life. So how do you navigate around that so that it's implied but never stated? Because obviously, some readers are going to be able to read into that, and then others probably it will just go over their heads in terms of their understanding of it.
Yeah. I don't think I've really ever purposely implied anything. It's just I'm not really comfortable with sex as a whole thing. That comes from me being asexual myself, and so I don't really talk about it at all. But the readers can more than imagine what they want with the characters, because with them being, and I do have 2 Arrow Ace characters, but since these are not 2 of them, people can imagine that they probably have in the past. I just don't really get into it at all.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I feel that I have some characters who have no intimacy mentioned at all, but I have a feeling that readers are going to be like, oh my God, that's a lesbian couple when they're together, and yeah. I never outright state it. I never talk about what they do, but they're just a duo. They're a pair. They work together. And I think that, yeah, some people are going to be like, oh my God, they're a couple, which people can use their own imaginations or not, and I think that's fine. We insert whatever level of sexuality is appropriate for us into our writing, and so you putting your level in is totally perfect. That's exactly how it should be. And the intimacy that characters can feel without sex can be so poignant, and so strong. So that's awesome.
Definitely.
It's almost like when you have that scene in a movie, isn't it, where you've got that chemistry that's on set between 2 characters that is never spoken, and you don't see them do anything, but it's just there. And it's all done through the the look and the raised eyebrows, or the sort of the downcast expression, or whatever. It's just really interesting how different authors incorporate sort of these kind of things within their writing, so that it opens it up to all different kinds of readers, and it's not aimed towards like one specific group. I know that you have to aim it vaguely towards a group, but you know, you don't want to aim it so narrowly that, you know, only that one single group of people can actually access what you're saying. But no, it's really interesting, and it's interesting as well because it's completely the opposite. Who he's in Reese's book and who's sat very quietly so far, and not said very much, apart from during the intro. But it is the complete opposite of what you've got in your book, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Share a little bit about your one.
My characters. No, my characters are all out, all wild and crazy. They do their own thing. So, yeah, for me, my genre is specifically for adults. Now, I'll tell you a funny story. I was actually talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and she goes, "I've been working my way through the book slowly but surely." She said, "Why has my 13-year-old finished your novel already?" I was like, yeah, that was me at 13, 14 with Terry McMillan novels. And it's funny that y'all say, you know, age appropriate things. But if you think about it, the one thing that most kids are going to do, because you tell them not to do something, they're going to want to do it anyway. So when it comes down to like different genres and things like that, they're gonna dip their toe in because they're curious about what is so interesting about this book. People keep talking about it, and my mom's friends and my friends are talking about this particular book. Okay, let me go check it out and see if I like it or not. So I mean, there are a lot of people that dipped into romance for that particular reason, and honestly, that's pretty much how I got involved with romance novels being younger. But my first love was horror, so that's an extreme change from one to the other. You're talking about 180 degrees.
Combine the two.
Genres. I mean, and you can. Let's just be honest. You can do that.
Yeah.
And there have been some people that have done that. But I just found that funny. But when she brought that up yesterday, and I cracked up, she's like, "Now, how did she finish this book before I did?" I'm like, just like every other kid is, sneak a chapter in here and there until they get everything done, but keep everything that you have in that book in the exact same place that they found it.
Oh yes. Yeah, it's really interesting because you've written very explicit scenes in your book, so they're very over. Whereas some of the books that Jahara has in her book are much more subtle and more covert kind of style of relationship. So you're having to sort of go at it with what you feel is going on rather than your interpretation and your subjective understanding of it as well, which is also something that Qualia was talking about at the very beginning of the show, which is awesome. Whereas you don't have that, Reese. Yours is literally just out there. This is exactly what's happening.
Right. I'm like, there's some suggestive things in there from time to time because, of course, my characters have, especially Jasmine, she's pretty quirky. So she's going to give snide comments about things that she's thinking just to kind of stir the pot. But I think with her, her and Naomi's relationship specifically, there was a lot of suggestive things happening prior to anything actually physically happening between the two of them. So you do get a little bit of you get more tension between them in certain scenes. And it's funny because the other girls are noticing things, but they're not quite sure exactly what's happening. And they don't find out until months and months and literal years later what the true situation was. So yeah, it's the author's job to really paint that picture. So just like with Jahara, she paints the tension into the scene with her words. So we can make the assumption that maybe Caleb had a relationship with the main character way back, and something happened, and they're sworn enemies. We don't know. She hasn't gotten to that point yet. But we can make that assumption based on their current relationship.
Yeah. And now I'm going to bring it to you as well, Adam, because you also have explicit content in your epic novel. So how have you kind of written that in? I know you said about characters that you have that subtlety there, but you also don't have the subtlety there as well. So how do you write that?
The starting end. It's Reese's is explicit. Mine is like physiological details with pages and pages. Like one sex scene takes 3 chapters in my book to finish writing. 3 whole chapters. Like and on top of it, so I've got basically 2 strikes against me with this. I've got really intense erotica with strong kink overtones, and also high fantasy. I strove to accomplish what Jules was saying. All those high fantasy requirements, they're all in there. It's totally ridiculous, but everybody's like banging their brains out the whole time also. So there's that, which is fun, and it's huge. It's 600 pages of action and sex, kind of. And again, most of the story is this character development. Oh no, it's mostly about the character development of the main character who is coming to terms with themselves by the end of the story. So that's the whole point of the entire adventure.
It's really interesting actually, because no, I was just going to say that 2 things actually. It's really interesting that the character development in our novels is really important, because it enables the reader to really engage with the sort of process that the character's having to go through, and the fact that we have to grow and change and develop as people too. And so it kind of educates us a little bit more on that. But what's really cool with yours and Reese's and Jahara's is the relationship styles that you have are all completely different. So like Reese, yours is set in almost present day real world stuff, whereas Adam's, yours is completely on a completely different place in a completely different time and dimension almost. And Jahara's, yours sounds like it's kind of mixing a complete mix of modern and contemporary and historical with future, and a kind of like a connection between all of those, and yet the relationships that go on between the characters in terms of how people express themselves, how people demonstrate their love, their care, their intimacy, or whatever with someone is fairly similar, isn't it? It's I suppose it's the human.
I guess it's the humanity, right? Look, we were on the same page. It's the humanity of it.
Absolutely. And with that, I'm dying to hear from you now, Carlia, if that's possible. I'm really sorry to have jumped in there, but I wanted to ask a few questions just to kind of settle my mind. So are you okay to go full screen?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Awesome. So Jahara, if you're able to put your book details in the private chat, what I'll do is I'll stick it up onto the main comments for live comments. And Qualia, what we'll do, we'll put you on the full screen so you're there on your own. So you just introduce who you are in your book, and you can just take your time, read whatever you need to, and when you get to a point where you want to stop, then you just stop it and just let me know and we'll come back. Is that all right?
Sure. Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If there are any details about your story you want to let us know about the characters or anything ahead of time, that's great. Or if you just want to dive in and just let us be surprised by what's coming, that's awesome too. Whatever feels good.
Absolutely. Whatever you feel most comfortable doing.
I feel like there's been several comments during the last part of the chat where I feel like we could have entire conversations about some of the stuff that's so interesting.
Yes.
And when I was a kid, I loved vampire stuff. I read Anne Rice probably at age 11 or 12. I read all of it. And one of the things that I love about vampire fiction is a lot of what I like about the way I kind of have been writing some of my sci-fi universe right now, and it's playing with the aspect of time. How does that relationship, what does that relationship look like after 1,000 years? We as mortal humans really don't have we can barely have a human relationship for 50 years. So I've always been fascinated by time in fiction, and that's what I liked about vampire fiction so much, is the theoretical possibility of these extraordinarily lengthy relationships. Like Anne Rice really gets into it with Lestat and the character of his mother and how that relationship massively changes. But sci-fi series like Foundation that take place over thousands and thousands of years, and stuff like that. I just am so interested. When I was also, I read a lot of really stuff that I probably shouldn't have read at 11, 12, 13. I read a lot of Robert Heinlein at 11 and 12, which was, although I can look back now and be like, there's a lot of problematic stuff in Heinlein. At the time, some of the ideas behind what he wrote still to this day inspire my creativity and my imagination. But there's one story, Time Enough for Love, where a human being has lived for thousands of years, and just what that would mean to a human being, and what does that mean to relationships. And so, like, he leaves the station and doesn't come back in that novel. Like, he goes there. He gets to the point where I think at some point in Time Enough for Love, he's traveled back in time and has sex with his own mother, because they get into this, like, well, what would it mean to be in a mother-son
Reese and I
relationship
freaking out at
when
that.
you're thousands of years old, right? Your mother raised you for the first 18, but like the brain wouldn't have even continued storing most of those memories after
Does that make
2,000
you your
years
own
of life.
father?
Yeah. And just so interesting how time would just change everything about being a human being. And
Hmm.
that, especially lately in the work that I do as a nurse and a scientist, in the evolving field of epigenetics, and how we actually can prove now that our experiences permanently alter our DNA. So if you've been alive for thousands of years, how, you're not even recognizably the same organism possibly at that point. Um, and I could talk for hours about all that kind of stuff. But so one of the things that was really central to me in these stories, and the one that I'll read, is the idea of time. And one of the things that I love about sci-fi and space, and sometimes hate about sci-fi and space, is I don't like it when hard sci-fi is like too focused on the science, because then they're not actually written by scientists, and a lot of it's not super scientific
Hmm.
basis. But I love it when it has almost a sense of humor about it. So like in Star Wars, they can pretty much get anywhere to anywhere by using quote unquote light speed, and it's like they're not like taking into any account any kind of like relativistic universe. It's all happening in real time. And so one of the things I wanted to play with in this series, or in this universe that I'm creating, is the idea of like, yeah, we've got wild speed ships. They travel hyperspace is what I call it, but it's still like the main character, in her quest, to find this thing that she's looking for. The return journey takes so long, even at hyperspace, that for the rest of the universe, 500,000 years have gone by. And so it was so interesting for me to research that, because I was like if this was the human race and you come back to Earth, the tectonic plates have shifted. Like
Hmm.
nothing is literally the same, even only in 500,000 years. But galactically, the universe doesn't care about 500,000 years. But so I love playing with stuff like that. And I think I had a thought earlier. I just have to get into this as well, real quick. Just one of the things we had talked about is like the implied nature of relationships in like a YA versus
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
definitely for adults kind of thing. And one of the things that I've
Hmm.
really started playing with a lot more is subverting audience expectation and leaning into audience imagination. So you write things in a way psychologically that different audiences will interpret the scene differently. And I've
Hmm.
loved that in this middle grade fantasy that I was telling you about earlier. There's this scene that takes place by the campfire where these two kind of bandits come, and it's a very like eerie kind of like early horror kind of a scene. And children that, some 12-year-olds that I know that have read it, uh, thought like it was going to be like a spiritual thing, or there was going to be like a monster coming out or something like that. Every single adult that read it anticipated that it was leading into like a rape scene. So it's really interesting how
Huh.
different
Yeah.
and one of the things that I love that I inspired kind of learning to like play with audience imagination like that is one of the things I love that Mark Hamill said about Luke Skywalker many times over the years. when people would ask him, is Luke gay? And he said, if you want Luke to be gay, then he's gay. Doesn't say that he's hetero, doesn't say that he's gay. That's the fun part about these kind of fictional worlds, is like, if you
Yeah.
leave certain things up for grabs, then it's like, uh, it's whatever you interpret it to be. So like,
That's,
sometimes I like to, sometimes I'll write a story and I'll go very detailed, but then sometimes I don't want to be detailed at all. Like sometimes like in certain, especially in like trying to be like overly detailed, they want to describe everything about the person,
Yeah.
but I like to sometimes leave that out completely, even gender. And then it's like this character could be, male or female or white or black, and it's all how the reader can, how can we see ourselves? We all want to see ourselves to some extent in
Mm-hmm.
these characters and to get invested in it.
Mhm.
And I love the idea of like specifically leaning into audience imagination to see how different
mm,
people will interpret it if I leave it creatively open on certain things.
Well,
Um,
you mentioned Star Wars, and to jump back to what Johara was saying, there has never been any implied sex at all in Star Wars.
totally,
They just left it out
totally.
no.
entirely. But
Yeah.
audiences have imagined the shit out of that stuff. They've
Yeah.
this person, and even when you have generations in Star Wars, you have suddenly you've got young Leia and Han, and then you suddenly have old Leia and Han who have children. So there was a relationship there, but they skipped over that entirely. It's just like magically appeared children. Like, yeah,
Yeah, and like you were saying about like letting the audience decipher what they want from it, the author Rick Riordan does that with his characters. By he never actually explicitly says a character's sexuality. Usually, he lets the audience decide what sexuality he thinks they have, which I think is
It's
a really
also,
nice
That's
yeah,
thing to
really
do.
I
interesting.
think it's amazing.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
main character in my middle grade fiction book is gay, and I think I've left enough Easter eggs that if you are queer, you totally pick up on it, and then other people won't. And I love that. Because then if the book, magically becomes a success and the publishing company's like, we want a sequel, he's definitely going to be openly
he's
gay
gonna be
in the
super
sequel.
gay.
And
Yeah,
it's like, sneak it in, sneak that in.
that's
And
awesome.
I'll be
Another
like, what? The
very
writing was on the
favorite
wall in the
super
first
guy.
book.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, the Star
My
Wars is
main
a really
character.
interesting
Oh, sorry, go
example.
on.
The Star Wars is an interesting
Mm,
example because, like you said, that's never talked about in the Star Wars universe, and yet the Twi'lek girls are like the most fetishized characters in pop culture in certain respects. So it's like
Yep.
it's interesting
yeah.
how like not mentioning it all, it still like, finds its way to get all over the place.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jules. Jules, what were you
In
gonna
my
say about your character?
Oh, no, no, it's okay. I was just gonna say, my character in my dark fantasy series, she is really exploring her sexuality. So, like in book one, she has no like raw interest. She gets assaulted multiple times, and it has quite a lasting effect on her. And in book two, there's a kind of hint at a relationship sort of starting between her and another main character who is a male. But in book three, she almost kind of switches and she starts becoming a lot more interested in a young female from the natives. And so, but you're still never left with an idea of exactly where she settles. It's not about what she likes, it's about who she likes, and it becomes
It's
much more
fluid.
about personalities
Love
and
that.
characters rather than what they look like. And so even though I'm describing, like Raven in book one, for example, the first time she sees him, she kind of notices that, what he looks like in terms of like, tone of skin and the fact he's tall and he looks, a bit older than her. But apart from that, there's no like, oh, and his big like, lovely like chest and muscles. There's none of that. And in book three, when she's with Katori, again, Katori's like, if you can think of like a green Gamora with pointy ears and um, attitude, like really stinking bad attitude, tattooed up and piercings everywhere, and doesn't give a shit about anything apart from just what she wants. And Ray's really drawn to her because it's just completely different to what Ray's used to. And so it's that character that Ray's just like, she's really interesting. I really like this person, even though I hate this person at the same time. But what I don't want to do is get into this whole thing of, because she was sexually assaulted by a man, therefore it's put her off of it, and then she's going to become a lesbian because of that. Because I think that's a trope that actually isn't a trope, isn't a real life thing. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to keep it, even though it is fantasy, I'm trying to keep the relationship style much closer to what we actually experience in real life. So yes, anyway, that's
yeah, I have something similar. This one character of mine, Roxanne, who's a werewolf, starts to figure out that she might be bisexual. After getting close to Calista, she immediately has this attraction towards her, but it's so much more than just the fact that Calista is a woman. It's who she is, and she starts to realize that she might like girls as well as guys, and she likes Calista for who Calista is, not that she's a woman.
And I think that's much more realistic, isn't it? And I think, obviously we do meet and see people that we are physically attracted to, but that's really it. It's the deeper connection that you have with someone that is important, and that doesn't rely on looks. That relies on who they are as people, I think, anyway.
Yeah, and that's often like what Quayle was saying about found family, and I think that's an important element that a lot of us use in our stories to show connection between people. Yeah, who are not being intimate but are still deeply connected to one another. I also, since we're all talking about it, I also don't make any specifics on my main character in the book. My editor was like, "Oh, so he's fluid, but he likes boys more," and I didn't put that. I mean, I didn't put that into my book, but that's how the editor interpreted it when they went through it the first time. Oh, he's mostly gay, but he's kind of fluid also. Okay, sure, if that's what you think, that's fine, because I don't ever come out and say it. And something else that Quayle said earlier, I put crazy amounts of details into certain characters in the story. A lot of my secondary characters, the main character is paying attention to them, and he sees all the accoutrements that they're wearing, or the way that their hair curls, or whatever about the person. But I never give a single detail about what the main character looks like at all in the entire story. So while the person's reading, they have to make up their own. So
like the red character. I remember the red character. Everything from head to toe was different shades of red.
Oh yes, that too. Yeah.
That's cool.
The perspective, the seeing and being focused on the other character, but I don't even know the character's name. the person in all red, Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. I think there's a slight delay my end, which is possibly why. Sorry. So in my books, again in the same series, the natives, they have no issue with any gender. So they are a complete collection of binary and non-binary, and refer to each other as they or he or she or there or whatever they want. There is no issue at all. Whereas the humans are the ones who are a bit like, ooh, which is kind of how some people are in our species anyway. But I wanted to write it so that wasn't an issue, in the sense that it was just an accepted part of their existence. A bit like eating breakfast or wearing clothes. It was just, that was who they were. And so, although I don't want to have that as a focal point in the stories, and there's no actual graphic scenes of sexual nature at all, it's all heavily implied. I wanted it to be so that was like a sidebar. It wasn't like a focus point. So where Ray is experiencing an attraction to Katori, she's still not kind of like, well, she's a different species to me. It's just like, she's a really interesting person. So it just, I thought it just like highlighted it in a subtle way, rather than kind of going, bang, read this.
I got a question, Jules. I got a question. Does your main character grow up with some of the local people around, or is she completely isolated in a human organization?
So when she's grown up, she doesn't know anything about the natives at all. Like
Okay.
she has never heard of them. She assumes that it's a human land. They call it Erde, which is also another word for Earth. And so she doesn't know any different. And it's not really until the end of book 2 that she actually meets the natives, and they kind of capture her. And I don't want to give too much away at the end of the story, but they kind of capture her, and so she's imprisoned again, but 600 meters underwater. And she's intrigued by them because they are scientists, they are technologists, they are, they have amazing abilities that she's intrigued by. So she's not scared of them. Um, but because she meets her, I don't want to give too much away. In book 3,
Spoil us.
she
Spoil us. Tell us everything.
you want spoilers? In book 3, so in book 1 and book 2, you're led to believe that her mum died during birth, giving birth to her. Her human mum gave birth to her and died while she was giving birth. So she doesn't miss her mum really, because she's never really known her. From her point of view, I know there are people out there who've had that happen, who do miss their mum and wonder what they're like, and I get that, but that's not for her. She's accepted it. But in book 3, you actually meet her real mum, and her mum isn't human, and so it kind of then leads into what that's possibly why she's actually quite interested by all this culture that she's surrounded by.
She appears.
And then
wait, so she appears human and she grew up with humans? No.
Yeah.
Wait.
So basically, the Orcarians, they're green. They use photosynthesis as a way of generating food, through their skin. And so they're very different to humans. However, their genetic DNA, when it's combined with human DNA, what happens is the human DNA in appearance is more dominant than the recessive DNA that the Orcarians have. So they look human. So you'd never know. The only giveaway is emerald green flecks in their eyes, and that's the only bit. And so yeah.
Okay.
So we get to meet her mum, and then we get to see a little bit more about why she's interested in the culture and stuff. And again, it's very similar to Jahara, where the history just is like between 1,000 years, about 5,000 years worth of history in the future. But what you were saying, Qualia, about time, and how Earth changes, one of the things that is planned at some point in her future is the opportunity to return back to Earth, which is where the humans came from, and what Earth would look like after the amount of time that they had been away, and how that would exist. Yeah. So that's something that
sounds interesting, Jules. Yeah, it seems like we might have some of the same themes in our stories, because I do have a character, the one I was mentioning, the werewolf. Even though she's always known she's a werewolf and knows her werewolf family, she grew up with humans. And the start of Realm of Monsters, she goes to the monster realm for the first time to be surrounded by all these other monsters and stuff. And even though she's obviously always known about these lives and stuff, there's a lot that she doesn't know, because she grew up in the human realm, so she knows what human thinks, like things you see in human movies about creatures. And because of that, there's a lot that she actually doesn't know, because her mind is clouded by what humans believe about these fictional beings.
Cool.
That's really interesting. I love that. And I love the fact that although there's similar themes, they're so differently written, so although it's a similar kind of thing that's going on, it's so unique as well, and a different take on it. So that's really cool. I love that idea. It's really interesting. Now I'm going to jump back to Qualia, who's been extremely patient with us. I'm really sorry.
Thank you.
It's like the third time lucky now. I'm sorry. It's such an interesting conversation though, which is why it's so I'm going to hand it straight over to you, Qualia, so you can introduce your work, introduce yourself, and you'll have the screen to yourself. If you're feeling a little bit anxious or awkward about it, just kind of indicate and we'll come back on. It's not a problem. But I'm sure you'll be absolutely fine. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Qualia. So,
Hi. I'm going to read, yeah, a little bit of this first one, just to give you a quick taste of what the kind of theme, what are the overall flavor of this universe is going to go. So, yeah, this is called The Final Kiss. She gazed beyond the midnight chasm, seeing the light on the other side of the Calliope door. The warmth of it echoed through her soul, and she felt herself drawn to it, wanting desperately to leave behind all that she had ever known for the promise of its embrace. Esmeralda had spent the last decade of her life traveling alone in her ship through hyperspace. On its own, that was enough time, but a decade spent in hyperspace meant that over 500,000 years had passed for the rest of the galaxy. Everything she had ever seen or ever been a part of had been reduced to ashes in the various corners of whatever must be left of the human galactic empire. The air in her suit tasted stale and vaguely salty from her own sweat. Part of her had wondered if the spacesuit would hold up after all these years, but so far it was faring adequately enough. She didn't need it to last forever, only long enough for this one last journey. The blue and green light that poured forth from the Calliope door was calling out to her, and she was entranced by its song. As she stood on the ancient rocky platform, built by a race so ancient that even their name had been forgotten, her memories forced their way into her thoughts. She bit her lower lip as the thought of their final kiss plagued her once more. In her memories, she saw Kai Althea's crimson hair blowing in the morning breeze as they walked together along the diamond coasts of Athlon. Kai Althea's lips pressed against hers tenderly and then hungrily as they both realized it would be the last chance either of them would ever get. 24 hours later, Athlon was on fire and Kai Althea was dead. Her princess, her light, and her sole purpose in life were gone. In an instant, Esmeralda 09B was alone for the first time in her life, an android adrift on a dead world. For years, she wandered the ruins of the kingdom, unable to claim her own life due to her programming, but also unable to find a reason to go on. 2 decades and 3 continents later, she came to the ruins of the Grand Library in the former capital city and set herself the task of preserving and reading every book that had survived the fall. She hoped that by memorizing every scrap of information that her culture had preserved in its largest library, that some small part of their people would survive within her. It was there in that once sacred place of learning that she'd found the Book of Constance. In its pages, she'd read of a doorway, a passageway carved into the fabric of reality that led to one's greatest desire. Esmeralda had a purpose once more, and it ignited her will to live. Holding the promise of reuniting with Kyothea inside of her artificial heart, Esmeralda began to search the cosmos for the Calliope door. Legends stated that it lay hidden in the Midnight Chasm, a dark, perilous nebula that was thought to be the birthplace of the universe. She knew it would be a long journey. The story was so old that even the location of the Midnight Chasm was lost to time. She searched through the city until she found a ship that was still operable and left Athlon for the first time since its destruction. Memories of her princess were never far from her thoughts. Even after a century searching across 1,000 worlds, she was unable to escape the feelings of Kyothea's breath on her neck or the sound of her laughter as they lay together in the hammock of the Kaltaran trees in the Summer's Palace's gardens. In every darkened nook and cranny on every beat-up old space station, Esmeralda thought she saw her lover's graceful form slipping in and out of the shadows. On every mirrored surface, she could have sworn she saw Kyothea's smiling face. Each time Esmeralda would spin around, though, she was as alone as she'd been for the past century. Everyone she met along the journey had told her that the Calliope door was nothing but a children's story, a fairy tale, not to be taken seriously. Her logic circuits must have begun to fail her at some point because she was able to continue on her mission even though her programming should have prevented such emotional quests that went against firmly available evidence. Now, though, she could see that it had all been true. She was the first being to have found the Calliope door in an uncountable span of years. The bright colors of the Calliope door were just beyond her reach here in the eternal darkness of the Midnight Chasm. All that was left was one last leap of faith. There were some that believed that the Calliope door was nothing more than a unique spatial anomaly, akin to a black hole, and that entering it would bring nothing but her annihilation. None of that mattered to her now. Esmeralda was determined to pass through the door and take one final chance at reuniting with her love. Her own destruction didn't scare her, it never had. In the grand scheme of the universe, she had long outlived the average android lifespan, perhaps even the entire human empire that had destroyed her world. Recently, though, she had begun to wonder, did androids even have souls? If she died now, would she be reunited with Kyle-Thea in some kind of afterlife? It seemed a crime if it was not so. Were her tears not as valid as that of an organics? Were her moans of pleasure while in the embrace of her lover not as joyful as Kyle-Thea's? The suffering and the heartbreak she had felt ever since that fateful day when the war had ended and Athlon lay in ruins felt more real to her than anything she had experienced since. Esme, came the soft voice of Kyle-Thea. When she'd arrived in the midnight chasm, Esmeralda had thought it was a trick. She had begun to hear her lover's voice, calling to her from across a great distance. In all of her years of wandering, her ship had become an amalgamation of various technologies and one of the few remaining Athlonian ships in existence. She had been out of contact with most of the galaxy for hundreds of thousands of years, but even so, she worried about leaving her ship unattended where anyone could steal it. Before departing, Esme decided to partition her mind, effectively cloning herself and splitting herself into two. One would remain in control of their body and enter the Calliope door, and the other would remain behind as the living mind of the ship to pilot it to the nearest star and ensure its destruction. After leaving the ship, the voice had come again, now with greater clarity. Her ship or her suit was equipped with water reclamation nanodrones, which gobbled up her tears so they didn't obscure her vision. She was thankful for the drones, as she hadn't ceased her silent tears since leaving the ship. I'm here, my love, said Esmeralda, the weight of time straining her vocal cords. I will not leave you again. Esme, called her long-dead princess, now more urgently. I'm coming, said Esmeralda. There was nothing left to do but take the final steps that would lead to her oblivion or her salvation. Nothing left in her heart but hope that in an infinite universe there was at least one chance that Kyle-Thea waited on the other side of the Calliope door. Esmeralda took her final deep breath and hurled herself across the space that lay between her and the door. The luminous glow of the door grew closer until it was all that her visual sensors could perceive. As she passed through the door, Esmeralda's final thought was of Kyle-Thea dancing under the triple moons on the beaches of Avalon. Kyle-Thea, the love of her life, smiling at her in her memories while the starlight shone down upon them both. That's it. Thanks for listening.
Yay! Thank you so much for reading it. I actually have it on my screen. I was reading along with you.
That was
That was
awesome.
that was amazing. That was amazing. Sorry, I was a little bit delayed pressing buttons because I was trying to do too many buttons at the same time. I'm so sorry.
No, but the intimacy that you created for having basically only one character in the whole scene and the whole story was beautiful. You told us how connected they were, and it was only one person there. That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. What was really interesting was how you described how the characters reacted to each other as well. I thought it really kind of led you into this, you could really see some of the tension that was going on and some of the relationship that they were having. And then you actually spent a long time thinking about how to actually make that come across to the reader so they could really get on board with the characters. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to like all the characters, but I thought the way it was written was excellent. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing that.
And you read it beautifully. Also, it was.
Thank you.
I find that I tend to read a little fast, and you read it so slow and allowed us to devour every word you gave us. It was beautiful. It was
I
really
feel
good.
like this one has to be read slightly slower because it's kind of like almost got some like poetic kind of stuff in there. And there's not
Mm.
really any action. It's just very like the last 2 seconds of a movie. She's deciding whether or not to hurl herself across into the doorway. So the very next story is a prequel to this. It's about her trying to find the door. And then the third part takes place after she goes through the door. And then parts 4 and 5 are kind of part 1 and part 2 of their own almost novella, where leads off after 3. She's still post the door, and then 6 almost ends up being a bit of both. And that all leads into the novel Electron Spin that comes out later in the year.
Wow.
And Esmeralda has kind of wound her way into my brain and won't let go. So all the stories are mostly about her and then her chosen family as she meets them.
That's awesome. And I know what you mean about the muse getting stuck, and once she's at work, you got to stick with her.
There's always that one character that tends to linger.
Yeah.
That lingers along.
What made
Or
you
like-
choose to write? No, go on. Sorry, go on, Adam.
I was just going to say, or like Quayla, like you said, that a character who demands attention. You know,
Yeah.
somebody you weren't expecting to write about, and they make themselves known to you, and yeah, they make you write about them.
Yeah, well, she kind of started out as this, like I said, this background character. She was going to be this like holographic sidekick. But the more I started writing, like this story that I just read, I just wrote the whole thing on the fly from seeing a picture somebody had posted online. And so it was just like very stream of consciousness. It's very kind of like one of the things that I love about Doctor Who is they use a lot of like, it's almost nonsensical words to like come up with names and background story. It's like kind of rolls off the tongue, like the Nightmare King and the Army of Never Was and stuff like that. That kind of like English, almost like nursery rhyme, kind of like early, almost scary stuff. And so I was inspired by that kind of like fantasy sci-fi in that way. I've often described some of these stories as like a more queer Doctor Who with like some Star Wars, Star Trek vibes kind of thrown in there.
It's amazing where we get our inspiration from, isn't it? You know, like, for example, Jahara and I have a similar theme going on in our stories, but we've taken that probably from either something that we've read or seen or experienced, or, something like that we all have with all of our stories. And it's really interesting how that is woven into our tales so that it goes from something that's already known to something that's ours. There's a quote, I can't remember who says it, but it says, "There's no such thing as an original idea." And I think I said it to a friend once who is also an author. And they were a little bit despondent. So this is not you, my lovely Rue. If this is who you're thinking of, sorry, just in case she's watching this is not you. This is somebody else. But they were like very quite like upset that they didn't have their own idea, that they were adamant that it came from themselves. And it's like, but actually, yes, the creation of what it turns into is, but the original, it doesn't, there isn't. There's
I totally
apparently only
agree.
like 7. You agree?
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, you can trace basically, if you look back to like the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Epic of Gilgamesh and all ancient folklore from across the world, it's all the same story. And I
Yeah.
love that about it. It's like this quote that I really like, where when Picasso first went to the cave of Lascaux and saw the cave paintings for the first time, he said out loud, "We've invented nothing."
Yeah.
In regards to
I
art
think I've
and
read that before. Yeah. It's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
I,
and to that like it's that whole like all art is theft. All art is built on the backs of the art that came before it, and all art is inspired by other art.
it's like the
Which is
creation
such an
story.
interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah, and like
Mhm.
the creation story. So although like the Bible creation story, for example, without going too heavily into religion, but um you have that story in there, but actually that is a story, one of many that actually follow a very similar format, the same as having the Son of God and the Son of God Rising. That also has been written about in other religions as well and other faiths.
Ad nauseum.
Yeah. So it's just like, well, I think it's nothing to be saddened by the fact that there's no such thing as an original idea. I think it should be embraced, and actually, that's an inspirational snippet, whatever you want to call it, that has then fed into your own taking, because that's the bit that's original.
Well, there's a progression, I think, like what we were talking about with Johara before, about the levels of horror, from child horror all the way up to really terror horror. I think that that Isaac Newton said, "I've been able to see so far by standing on the shoulders of giants."
Yes.
What J.R.R. Tolkien set up with the Lord of the Rings, I mean, he was looking to mythology in order to be inspired, but then he allowed all of us fantasy writers to write things that he could not have possibly imagined, But we have to be inspired by something. Somebody had to be first.
Yeah, even his stories came from his own experiences, which was what in the First World War.
World War I.
Yeah.
He was a teacher of Norse mythology or something crazy like that, along with English. I mean, he was into all sorts of fantastical stuff.
Well, he actually booked himself into, he was studying a course at university, and because of like his experiences, and because he had this idea in his mind of writing this story, and he'd reached a sticking point, he actually changed his course and booked himself into a language course to learn how to write a language, which is where Elvish comes from. And it is literally a brand new language. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, I think it's really cool that we also use tropes. So many people don't like tropes. They're like, oh, so tired of tropes, But the thing is, without the tropes, you don't have that anticipation of what's going to come next, because if you know what a trope is, so like, I don't know, what's a typical trope would be a love triangle, for example, which is fairly rare in normal terms, isn't it? I don't know. I've never known anyone who's been in a love triangle. I don't know about you guys, but in my experience, no one has. But that doesn't really happen. But love triangles tend to be a trope that is used in lots of different genres, like the Hunger Games, for example, Twilight. It's there. And whilst you might not like that specific one as a trope, it works. It works for a reason, because then you're like, what if, and as a human, you're kind of looking at it going, well, who would you choose? So like in the Hunger Games, you're either Team Peter or Team Gale, whoever you wanted to be, or Team Jacob and Team Edward.
Right.
And so by doing that, what you're doing is you're investing that time in those characters. So tropes have a purpose that I think are really important. It enables the reader to have that anticipation of what might happen next, the expectation. And like in children's stories, you want to have the trope of the happy ending, because whilst having sad endings is probably more accurate in some sense, you don't want to have a 3 or 5, 6, 8, 9-year-old crying at the end of the story because something's happened that's terrible. So I don't know. I think that we should embrace those original ideas and turn them into our own.
Yeah.
The Grimm's fairy tales are like that. The Little Mermaid Grimm's fairy tale is horrific.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Got my Little Mermaid hoodie right here. I was too hot to wear it, but I've got it. I've got my Little Mermaid hoodie. I was going to wear that this afternoon.
I love it. And just sorry, Johara, I'll come to you in just a second. And with the Little Mermaid as well, like over here, when the Little Mermaid, the new one came out, no one batted an eyelid. They were just like, okay, cool. And there was so much things coming over from across the pond about, oh my God, she's black. It's just like, she's a mermaid.
Right. It's fiction. Come on.
Part of that story. Not that she's got half a fish body.
Yeah, it's just like, well, let's consult the
Little
mermaid
takes place in the Caribbean, so she wouldn't be a pale white person anyway.
I know, know. It's just bonkers. Yeah. So as you showed that, I just thought, okay. Yeah. So over here we were just like, yeah, there's a new mermaid coming out. Yay, that's cool. And then over in America, it's like, but she's not white. It's just like, but she's a mermaid.
That's
Okay,
not
anyway,
my
sorry.
Ariel.
I mean, yeah, I think it's people don't like change. Like they're used to that white, red-headed mermaid, so that's what they expect. I mean, with the new Percy Jackson TV show coming out, I don't know how familiar you guys are with Percy Jackson. I've only recently got into it, and I'm really enjoying it. But the TV show that's coming out, they casted Annabeth as black instead of this blonde white girl, which is what she is in the books. And there was a lot of discourse over that when the casting first dropped. And I heard rumors about people actually going after the actress, and she's like a 12-year-old girl.
Yep.
Oh, that's
Like,
sad.
that's messed up.
I hate that.
Like,
Same thing happened
so
with
she's not the
Spider-Man.
person you envision, but that isn't the point, because I mean the author is heavily involved in the story, and he wouldn't have casted this girl unless he thought that she was the best person for the job. Like,
Exactly.
these are his
Right,
characters.
James. Absolutely.
Uh-oh. Are we
Oh, he's
frozen?
frozen.
I can see.
Oh, okay. I think
I think Jahara's
just
frozen a little
Jahara's
bit.
frozen. Oh no, Jahara, if you can hear us, I
Oh,
think
oh.
reset your system
Some
and
people have
sign.
frozen, some people haven't. So
Uh-oh, Jules is frozen now. Oh God.
I've got. Oh, we're back again.
Oh no.
Technology.
Jahara's still frozen. Oh, bless her.
Things are freaking out.
So like with James Bond, I'll just remove her for a moment so she's not.
Oh
Stuck
yeah,
in
that was a
frozen
good one
position,
too.
Bless her. So James Bond, like, over here, we're just like, okay, so it's going to be female and black. Okay. There's so many people are like, oh my god, but James Bond's male and white. It's just like,
Well, that
who
exact
cares?
same thing
He's a
happened.
fictional character.
That exact same thing happened when Disney decided they wanted to do their was it the 25th anniversary of Beauty and the Beast, and they cast the musical artist Her to play in this television special. People were freaked out. I don't know who this is, and I'm like, you know what? It's just a special. They're not even redoing this movie. It is truly a television special. There's maybe like 7 scenes where she's actually going to be there, and they show clips of the original animation. It was insane. But when they actually saw it put together, they're like, "Oh my gosh, she has such a beautiful voice," and this, that, and the other one, and blah blah blah. Who is she? And wait a minute, let me go look her up. I'm like, yeah, she's an amazing artist. She's amazing. She's an amazing guitarist. Stop making preconceived notions about these people and these ideas until you actually see the finished product. I'll give you a really good example. The series Miss Peregrine's Home for the Peculiar Children.
Yeah.
I was upset with the movie because they did not put the movie into perspective as they did with the book. Because I mean, you know, movie interpretations, book interpretations is always kind of crazy, but the lead female character was not the lead female character in the book, but they chose her for aesthetic purposes. And if you read it, you'll know exactly what I mean. But I mean, but that happens a lot. And it's unfortunate that people can't accept that it's not about the physical visual, you know, the visual aspect of the individual. It's about the storyline. It's about the interpretation of the storyline.
But it's like at the moment you've got this whole thing about drag queens going on in America as well, you know, and I genuinely find it hilarious because basically over here we have Panto season, which runs normally from November through to January, end of January. And I don't know if you know anything about Panto or seen Panto, but it's a Christmas tradition that we have every single year. Every theatre in the whole of England, at least, possibly, you know, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland as well, do the same. And it's a tongue-in-cheek comedy with adult jokes aimed at kids, and there is always a widow twankie / drag queen on it, always. And they normally play the mother of Peter Pan, or no, not Peter sorry, the mother of Wendy, John, and Michael, the mother of Cinderella. You know what I mean? And it's hilarious. And we take kids like babies and toddlers, and we love it. And so we've grown up with that throughout our entire existence. And so for me, I'm just like, well, okay. I don't get the whole issue that's going on with it at the moment. Jahara's back, so I'm going to add her back to the screen. Sorry, what did you say?
I was having internet issues.
Don't worry at all. You're back now. It's fine. I was just talking about the pantos that we have over here and the drag queens. That an issue in America at the moment, and that over here in pantos, there's always a widow twankie. They're called widow twankie as a generic term, but like they're all sorts of different names. And we have that every year, and kids go and see the performance, and they love it. And it's completely non-sexualized. But throughout the entire performance, there are adult jokes peppered in that only the adults are laughing at, and the kids are like, "Huh?" If you ever get a chance
it's like that in every Disney and Pixar movie too. There's always any animated kids movie in the theaters these days. There's jokes that just the adults get. It's just people want to hate on what's different. It's all the way it's been for so long, and the internet just makes it all worse. I take my kid to drag events all the time. It's not a big deal.
No,
it's not going to take my kid to how to load a 9mm course.
Right. Exactly.
Absolutely. It's just ridiculous. They want to sexualize people dressing up in clothes.
Meanwhile, they're dressing up their children. Meanwhile, they're dressing up their children and completely sexualizing their own kids. And
absolutely,
it's really weird to have people be angry at drag queens, and meanwhile they're making their kids. You are the perfect girl. You will be a girl. You're going to grow up. You're going to have a family. You're going to find a good husband. You're going to have a 2.5 years, whatever the thing. All that. That is the sexualization of youth, not them seeing us in women's clothing.
Exactly.
Clothing. It's just clothes. It doesn't matter whether it's male or female. It is literally just clothes. So, like 100 years ago, women wearing trousers was considered far too sexual for them, and it's just like now you're
trying to be masculine. Then
I know. I think it's nonsense. They are literally just clothes. And I get the fact there are some more risque outfits than others, and some more, like, for example, if I was walking into a classroom, I wouldn't wear a see-through top, for example, and no bra. That would be extremely wrong. But I would wear clothes that are appropriate to the job that I'm doing, not that are necessarily appropriate to my gender, because that's just a social construct. It doesn't mean anything. So that I feel better now. I've got out my stress from like the whole thing in my system.
Drag queen soapbox.
Sorry, I need a soapbox to get up and start shouting. Oi, it's just clothes. Get rid of the male and female section in the clothing shop. Just put clothes. We are a clothing store, and that's it.
Exactly. I mean, it's rather ridiculous to even care. I mean, my dad really liked this one movie that was centered around drag queens called Tu Wong Fu. And my sisters ended up watching it. And, sorry, that's my brother bothering me. My younger sisters ended up watching it because he had it on. And they ended up really liking it. And my parents didn't care that they were watching it because it's just clothes. Who cares who was underneath the clothes?
There's a really good movie.
And that was the point of the movie.
Yeah. Kinky. There's a film called Kinky Boots, which is all about
one of my favorites.
That's a great
Kinky
one.
Boots. Yeah, it's a really good film. And if you for those people who don't know, if you're watching, it's basically about trying to find the best right shoes that fit these drag queens. And obviously, high heels aren't necessarily great for bigger feet. Even though, do you know the history of high heels?
Tell us, because it's interesting.
Well,
to keep women from running away. No, I'm joking.
That used to be for men.
I can run in high heels. Thank you very much.
Color
I can strut in them.
Oh, okay. I don't know about
Yes,
strutting. I
honey.
can run in them. So they were actually created originally for people who worked in butchers because it was to keep their feet dry from all the blood and the stuff that was all over the floor. And
Delightful.
it was men who were doing the butchering. So, and if you look at the 17th and 18th century dress code that the men were wearing, they were wearing high heels then.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's
I
just
mean,
clothes.
who cares if men want to wear something more feminine or women want to wear something that's not so feminine? I mean,
Yeah,
well, who determines what's feminine in the end, anyways? I mean,
exactly.
me, I'm kind of half and half. Like, I like dresses, but I also don't like makeup, you know, and I prefer shorts and tops sometimes too. So I'm kind of half and half. But if I decide to wear a suit, you know, instead of a dress to a formal dance, who cares? You know?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that
I hate
I think
stereotypes altogether. Like these stereotypes against like lesbians and stuff. Like people always say like lesbians are supposed to be like butch or
Mhm.
and yeah, sometimes they are, but I'm not, and I'm a lesbian. Like I like to wear girly things sometimes, but I sometimes I don't. It really depends on my mood. Sometimes I want to wear dresses. Sometimes I want to wear, you know, shorts. It just depends on my
Yeah.
mood, and it doesn't
Yeah.
make me any less of a lesbian because I actually
No.
look like a girl.
Well, right. I think
Absolutely.
there's an issue that the queer community is sort of in the process of coming to terms with right now of that person's not gay enough, that person's not
Yeah.
trans enough, that person's not lesbian enough, that person's too femme, that person's too fat, that person's too whatever.
Yeah.
And I think the queer community is finally realizing that that's fucked up and they need to get over that and realize that LGBTQAI plus means anybody who falls into that category, not anybody who you think falls into that category. And
100%.
Right.
Yeah. But
And it's up to
bisexual,
you to self-identify, not be identified.
Say again?
absolutely.
Yes.
It's up to you to self-identify, not to be identified. So
Yes.
if you
Absolutely.
are in the LGBT, join the party, jump in.
Yeah.
Like the whole idea of passing in any aspect of that term, whether it's passing for gay enough or passing for a transgender person or whatever, is an outside ideal that's been put on to the queer community. It's not,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, it's been embraced for a long, long time.
Yeah.
You are just a man in women's clothes. No, I'm a drag queen. I'm something different. I'm a transgender
Yeah.
person. There's so many different things that are so specific
Yeah.
to everybody, and the community is starting to say, we're sorry, and we want to accept everyone. And I think that's important. And it takes people saying, hey, stop doing this. You are good enough right where you are. Your amount of being a lesbian is perfect. Your amount of sexuality and the intimacy level that you want with another person is perfect wherever you are. Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I know there's also a lot of erasure towards aro ace people because
Yeah.
people saying that with asexuality, it's people calling it celibate, and that's erasing it because it's
Yeah.
not a choice. It is a sexual identity because you don't
Mhm.
get a choose if you have those. You know, I mean, I'm an aro ace lesbian, and I feel like sometimes my aro ace side gets erased. And I've been told that I can't be aro ace and a lesbian. I'm like,
Defend it.
it's a spectrum. Like only
Yeah.
I know where my identity lies.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
my asexual part
Mhm.
lies on the 0. I'm not comfortable with anything sexual for myself.
Yes. Yep.
Like I'm sex positive. You guys want to do that? Then great, go for it. But I don't. And then for my aromantic, that's not exactly on the 0 scale. I do have romantic attraction. It's just smaller than the average person. And that's where the lesbian comes in because the romantic attraction I do have are for women. I just have 0 sexual attraction.
Yep.
And I'm just tired of my aro ace side getting erased because apparently it's not possible to not feel that attraction. Seriously,
Nope.
like I know what I feel and stuff.
And they're valid. Those feelings are totally valid. Yep.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also as well the bisexual community has had a bit of a raw deal
Right,
as well,
right.
because a lot of people look at them as either too greedy or people who can't make their mind up.
Indecisive.
Um,
Right.
Indecisive, yeah. Pick a side. Choose something rather than sort of sitting on the fence. And again, that's not how it works either. And so I'm not saying that that's worse than anything else. I think it's part of the problem.
Mhm,
Um,
Society
and
sucks. That's all it is to it.
no, I think that some society sucks, but I think that it's about education, isn't it? And it's like the pronouns thing as well.
Definitely.
I don't get the issue that people have with pronouns, because
Yeah, I
everyone has pronouns. It's just like if you introduced yourself, you say, my name is such and such. You just accept that. So
Right.
it's no different.
You're
How
not
does
going
that
to call somebody by a different name. Yeah,
No.
but we insist
How
to do
does
that.
that-
Right.
yeah. How does that affect me calling someone else by something that they wish? That doesn't have any impact on me, but it means the world to them. So,
Mhm.
It's,
And that's why we want to celebrate everybody on this podcast. We are all
100%.
about celebrating everybody that comes
Yeah.
on here. Yes. And is that a Clash poster behind you from the band The Clash? Is that what I keep saying? Yes. Oh my God. One of my favorite all-time favorite bands of all time. Like, yes.
That's so
Sorry,
cool.
go. Sorry. Joe Strummer. Oh my God.
Forever.
I just don't understand. Like, I know there's the Monster High. I don't know if you guys ever seen it, but I'm a huge fan.
Yes.
But they rebooted it, and I'm really liking the reboots. A lot of times I don't always like reboots, but this one I do like. And they're making it so much more diverse on many levels. And one of
Yeah.
them is one of their main characters is now non-binary. And
Oh,
I know
Right.
yeah, and there was at first there's a lot of people there's still some people I've seen discourse on Twitter still about how they don't understand why they decided to make Frankie weird by giving her pronouns, and they're still calling them her instead of them and they. I'm like, seriously? And that's not the only thing though. It's not even about sexuality diversion either. I mean, how animated characters tend to be just like super skinny and stuff, not always realistic body types. Well, this one is actually having realistic body types. There's actually a couple characters that are a bit bigger. They're not fat, they're just realistic.
Mhm.
And there are people that are
Normal
fat
people.
characters
Yeah.
because they have realistic body types. And I'm like, seriously? What is wrong
Yay.
with people?
I really like the Last of Us. I think it's whatever show it's on, whatever channel it's on. But the Last of Us, which is obviously a remake from the game. It just all the characters on it are just normal looking people, and it makes it so much more relatable than watching people who are completely glammed up in full makeup and skinny and size 0 and all this kind of nonsense. And it's just like, people don't look like that. But the problem is it's sexy. It's sex. It says little Freudian slip there. It sets the I can't remember what I was saying now. It sets the tone. It makes people think that that's what the expectation is of what people are going to look like. When people don't look like that in real life, they're like, "Oh, you don't look like normal," and it's just like, well, hang on a second, you are normal.
Exactly. And that's why I still love the original Monster High. It'll always have a special place in my heart. But one thing I love about this reboot Monster High is the fact that it is so diverse in many aspects. In race, there's so many different races this time around. There's sexuality, there's realistic body types. And I've seen less and less of people having issues with it, thankfully, but there still will always be those people that just don't like it. And it's just ridiculous. Like, why do you care? I mean,
anything that's not straight and white, they're going to be upset about. They're going to be upset about anything not straight and white. Yeah.
But I don't get it. I mean, first of all, they're more realistic. So like everyone can probably find someone in this new universe that they relate to, at least one person, because there's such a variety. And two, they're literal animated characters. You say you care that much about animated characters? Just saying.
Yeah.
This is the whole thing. I don't understand with the M&M's thing that's going on at the moment. Like,
green M&M.
Oh my
What?
goodness! It's like fucking candy. Who gives a shit what they look like? They're not real. It's just like
You're sexualizing the
I
candy
it's
now.
just-
Come on, man.
There's Discord over M&M's. Where have I been? I haven't heard this.
I missed that one. Yeah, I missed that.
You've missed
Yeah.
you've missed the whole M&M's thing. Oh my god! So M&M's basically changed the outfit of one of the M&M characters, the animated characters that they use, and changed them from wearing boots to trainers or something, or sneakers, whatever. And then they changed the outfit of another one, and then another pair looked like they were lesbians or something, but like they're still candy. It's animation. Who gives a shit? And then you have Tucker Carlson, of all people, and the far right media, Fox News and all that, basically making this massive song and dance about these animated characters for this sweet, and it's just like they are candy. They're not real.
We don't have much to talk about.
They don't exist. Oh my
I
God.
completely missed that discourse.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
that's
nuts.
hilarious.
I made myself a New Year's
It's
resolution.
just
and every time I
ridiculous.
see
Yeah.
something ridiculous like that, I'm gonna try hard to be extra gay.
Oh, I love it.
Honestly, it comes down to people wanting something to complain about, something to hate on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is it. But they're so
We'll give 'em
interested in
something
what
to
goes
hate.
on. Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah.
You hated me before. I'm gonna go 5,000 times as good. Let's see what you think.
We're
about
gonna
it.
up the ante. Yeah.
What I want to know is why they're so concerned about what goes on underneath bed sheets. I don't understand the fascination that they have. It's almost like they've gone past that. I'm just interested because
I
I find it disturbing.
honestly think there's an answer. I think most men are way gayer than they think they are, and we
Oh, I
culturally
agree.
live in a society that doesn't let them embrace any aspect of that at all.
Absolutely.
And so I think they're fascinated with it because they're fascinated with it. They may
Yeah,
not
I
know
agree.
what they are.
I
Yeah.
agree.
They're
most women
closeted.
and most women are their sexuality is very fluid anyway, and it changes throughout their lifetime and doesn't sit with just one sexuality they've found. So
I think that applies to everyone, but I think culturally we're
Yeah.
forced to not to see, oh, it's okay. Women are
I agree.
beautiful, so women can be attracted to women because they're beautiful, whatever. But men should be manly, and some men are into manly men. You know, there's just that.
the first time my son saw two men kissing was when he was 7, and it happened to be on. There was I don't watch it anymore, but have you heard of EastEnders? It's like a soap opera that's really famous over here. Yeah. And there was a storyline a long while ago about a gay couple, and they were kissing on screen, and he stood there watching, and he just didn't say a single thing to me, and I didn't say anything to him, and I just left it, and I just thought, well, that's just normalized it for him then. Great.
Mhm.
And now he's an adult, and he walks around with nail varnish and jewelry, and
Yes.
it's just which I think you saw a couple of weeks ago. He came in and showed off his nail varnish, and so it's just like I don't know. I just think that some people, I think some people are obsessed about the local stuff. Yeah,
I know when
I think. Go on.
sorry.
No,
I was
no,
just
go
saying,
on.
I know when my sister and I were younger, we used to like to dress my dad up and put makeup on him and jewelry. And he'd let us. He had no problem. But
That's awesome.
I know there's a lot of straight guys that are too of the manly kind, like, oh, I'm too manly. I'm not. My dad was literally talking to someone when I was a kid, a friend's parent, and the dad was like, I would never let my kids dress me up or something because I'm a man or whatever. And he's like, so what? It makes my girls happy. That's all that matters.
Mm-hmm.
A real man is not afraid to show his feelings. A real man is not afraid to show who he is, or who they are, or how they feel. And a real man is someone who can just express themselves in the way that they feel most comfortable and associate the term man in whatever format they want, regardless of whether that is, they want to have it as a more gender fluid version, a non-binary version, or just associate it with a little apostrophe before the letter M, so it becomes a shortened version of the word human, which is what I think we should start doing.
It's beautiful.
Honestly,
I
I
said that
mean,
in rebuttal to my dad recently. I was like, isn't all of this just exactly what you told me what being a man was all about? It was just not giving a shit what other people think, and I'm just going to be myself unapologetically because I'm independent and I'm in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. Um, go on. Did you want to say something, Jahar?
I was just gonna add one more thing in this whole, discourse conversation. I hate when people are like, "How do you know that you're a lesbian if you've never been with a guy? Or how do you know you're asexual if you never had sex?" And it's like, some people, they need to experiment to know because they are confused.
Yeah.
They're not sure from the get go. But then there are other people that just always know. My mom says she knew I was a lesbian when I was 5. I still don't know how, but apparently she did. And my best friend knew when we met, and we met when I was 13. I didn't discover it until I was like 14 or 15. It's like apparently it was just something that was obvious about me. And I just always, I guess, had that feeling like I was always more comfortable around women and more I don't know. I talked more about women and stuff, so I guess it was kind of obvious. And it's just my mom said next time someone says that to me, I should be like, "How do you know you're straight if you've never been with a man?"
Mm-hmm. That's the right answer. That is the right answer.
Totally.
Having
Some
looked after.
people have never, sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say some people have never, kids that have never eaten an ice cream can still look at an ice cream and go, "Ooh, I want that."
Yes.
That's an amazing
And like,
analogy.
I've
I
never
love
eaten
that.
viper eggs, and I'm pretty sure I don't want those.
Right. You know what you're into. You know.
Yeah.
I love
I
that.
was, 6 years old, and I was like, oh, I want to kiss boys.
Having looked after a vast number of young adults and children in my lifetime, a number of years, some children, like 2 years old, you can say, yeah, they're going to be gay. That they are. You can't. It's difficult because if you start labeling children with they're going to be straight, they're going to be this, then it kind of you're then going a bit too far. But you can say they are when they get older. That's their kind of gender, or that's their sexuality, or that's what they're leaning towards. And I can't tell you exactly what it is that gives it away because it's unique for every child. I don't know if Carly can kind of attest to some of this a little bit as well, but sometimes when you meet people, particularly young people, you get a vibe from them, and there's nothing negative at all. It's just it's just like, oh, I get a vibe that this person appears to be more female than male or whatever. It's the same kind of thing. It's difficult to explain, but that certainly is a thing that you can tell when someone's a lot younger.
There's a scale. I think it's called the Kinsey scale for how homosexual feelings are, and
really.
Yeah. So Fozzie, our author buddy that we love, he is far gay on the one end of the spectrum as you can possibly be. He just thinks women are meant to be respected, and that's all you can do, And he only likes men. But to know that there's an entire number system of how much you can like someone of your own gender or someone else's gender that has been laid out and scientifically studied is pretty amazing.
That is
and that on the Kinsey scale, most people are in the middle.
Yes, of course.
That modified one that's coming out right now actually includes a YZ axis of gender, which produces the entire Kinsey scale into a cloud.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Everybody's, science. We're just realizing in every scientific field, for the most part, is that science doesn't really do absolutes. It's all fluid.
Yeah, well,
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They also found as well. Oh no, sorry, Adam.
Sorry.
I think there's a delay. Sorry. It's all right. Go on. Do you want to go first?
I don't remember what I was going to say now. I've spaced out. Sorry.
Oh no, that's fine. So I was just going to add into what Qualia said about science and how there are certain things to do with the DNA that you can actually identify. that they have discovered that there are multiple genders within the DNA strand,
Oh yes, yes.
within the genome. So actually, it completely 100% is an actual thing. Same as sexuality is an actual thing. But I think because of the way society's progressed forward and the way humans have progressed forward and our knowledge and stuff, we're only really starting to go into this new age of enlightenment where we're starting to discover who we actually are. And anyone who says that animals aren't gay has never seen it happen, because some of them are.
Well,
And some are asexual and some are hermaphrodites and all sorts of things.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Well, and what you were saying, Qualia, that I feel like terminology that we all need to ascribe is sort of a double-edged sword. We've got male, female, these two things. It's very easy for humans to understand this two binary system. There's just two things. I don't have to think about too many more. But ever since like the term non-binary came around in sort of the early 2000s, and people have started pushing that that term doesn't apply to me. I need to come up with a different term that applies. Those terms have made it more confusing for people, but also have allowed so many people to find an identity that makes sense to them. Like as I was growing up, I had no term that made sense to me. My mom has asked me, "Are you going to come out of the closet as gay?" Well, no, I'm pansexual, and that I couldn't have an answer for that until I learned a term that applied to me. I don't know. You can't label me like that, Mom. You can't make me be this thing that I don't identify as. But she really was just like, everything about you is gay. You're a gay person. I don't understand why sometimes you date women, and that's just who I was.
I'm just being me, Mom.
Right. Well, and
Exactly.
I really love the term pansexual, because it was originally defined as gender blind, as not recognizing gender. And not to give anyone too much information about myself, but growing up, I wanted to be with a beautiful woman who had a penis so badly. That was my fantasy as a little kid. I was very sexual as a child. I love beautiful naked things. I was fascinated by fashion magazines. Oh God, I loved fashion magazines as a
That
child.
sounds like the opposite of me.
That's so awesome. We all have to be unique, that's what I'm saying, is like, it came a time when somebody was like, this term means this thing, and I was like, oh, that's what I've always been, and it came to me and it made sense. And so
yeah, I mean, you have to wait until you hear the term that just works for you. I mean, because there are a lot of terms that are just recently coming out and stuff that you never heard before.
very new.
I mean, like I said, I came out as a lesbian when I was in high school. I was about, I want to say 14, 15, around that age. And no one was surprised, apparently. But then when I was 20, my sister, who's a year younger than me, she said that I might be asexual. And she didn't say like you're asexual because you don't like this or this. It's like you might be because of me being uncomfortable with sexual things. I'm 20 and still, haven't really experienced anything, which is not impossible, but is kind of rare. And so I hadn't actually heard that term before. And then when I got home, I started researching what asexual really is to really understand it. And then when I did, I was like, this fits me so well. And
yes, that's awesome.
I was like, I feel more whole than I did. Even if I knew I was a lesbian, this is another piece of the puzzle of discovering who I was. And then it was actually the beginning of last year. I was 22. I'm 23 now, but I was 22, and I had started researching aromantic because I was 22, and I still hadn't really been in a romantic relationship, and I know I like women, so I was confused. But because at the same time, even though I know I like women, I also like being single. And even though I might get in a relationship with a woman someday, I also see myself maybe being single. So I was confused. And at this point, since I knew what asexual was, I knew what aromantic was. So I decided to research it a little bit more. And I was like, I think I'm aromantic as well, just on a different part of the spectrum. And I just now I feel so much more whole because I know the full piece of the puzzle that I didn't know a few years ago. And it is a lot more refreshing. And people who think that sexuality doesn't matter, that maybe it doesn't matter for you, but it does matter for some people because they can feel maybe not whole without that full view of who they are. At least that was my case. And there are people that don't want to be labeled, and that's okay. There's also people that just want to know who they are, and they feel like they can without all these pieces.
And I will say that sexuality and gender are fluid, and every day is perfect for you. And so if someday you feel more romantic, or someday you feel some sexual feelings, or someday you are interested in a man, those are all totally legitimate and appropriate feelings that you might have someday, because we are ever evolving beings, and you may be a certain way forever, and that's how you always are. And that's totally awesome also. But you might be a little different from day to day. And I think that needs to be celebrated.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I am single right now. And I like being single. I like doing my everyday thing, worrying about myself and my career as an author. And it's not like I don't have any human interactions. I have my family, I have my friends. It's not like I'm all lonely, because I don't feel lonely. And right now, I'm okay if I'm single. And I might still be okay if I'm single in 5 years. Maybe I'll want a relationship. Maybe I'll have a relationship. I have no idea what 5 years will have in store for me. But as of right now, I am happy with who I am, and with being single, and with just worrying about my writing.
And just remember that as your feelings evolve, they're still valid. No matter what you feel, your feelings are valid.
Yeah, 100%. Now, with that, really, I'm loving this conversation so much. But
I learned so much with these conversations.
I know. We've gone a little bit over. I know. But it's such an interesting conversation.
So good.
I thought, and what I'd really love to do is invite you both back on again. Johara, it's been lovely seeing you again. And Carly, if you'll have us, we'd love to have you back on here. And maybe we could continue the conversation. Maybe just have a session just on this kind of conversation. It's really interesting. So I'm going to also say Melanie's in the wings. She only joined just a short while ago, so I'm just going to say hi, Melanie. But we're going to end now, so I'm really sorry. Adam, do you have any final remark you'd like to make?
Let's see. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we're supposed to talk about that we didn't even get to. There's a writing contest coming up. Remember, if you'd like to be interested if you're interested in the writing contest, just reach out to one of us. We've all got the details. Yeah. I think that was the only thing we didn't really get to.
I'll show the this is the no, sorry, that's background. Sorry, I put it on the wrong one. Hang on, let me do the overlay. Hang on, where has it gone?
Anyways, these images have been shared. There it is. We've been sharing these images over social media. Yes, so it's our very first literary competition. We've opened up the acceptance of submissions for an extended period of time, so we can get a good number of submissions from people. So it's a 1,000 word limit. You can write poetry, you can write a short story, you can write whatever you want. We are celebrating creativity. We want people to put wild creativity, if we want to celebrate you being a unique writer. And so in order to do that, we've tried to sort of get everybody focused into one like writing idea together. So we've put 3 items that we want to have featured in everybody's work, and we want you to be creative on how you present them. The 3 items are a magnifying glass, a wolf, and the outer rings of Saturn. Now, they can be anything you want. I say this each time. They can be drinks on a cocktail menu. They can be actual things in outer space with some sci-fi story that you're writing. They can be elements in a poem that are personal symbols of something else that are important to you. We want you to be creative. Use these 3 items, write 1,000 words or less, and send it to us so that we're going to publish you. We're going to give money to the Trevor Project from the sales of the book. We are totally excited about this first competition, and we're going to do it again in the future. So I think that's all the details. That was a lot.
So Yeah, it was. Just a couple of bits on there. So it is $10 entry fee, and that just kind of covers costs. And the winners will have their work published in a compilation book, which they can obviously buy. And yeah, any genre is welcome, poetry and short stories. So if you make the payment, the QR code is on the screen. Just scan that and it'll take you straight through to the payment processing bit. And yeah, and the proceeds 15% go to the Trevor Project, which is an extremely worthy cause. So yeah, so thank you so much. Now hang on a sec, I've got to click that. So without further ado, I am going to say a huge thank you to both Jahara and Kakwalia for joining us today. Massive thank you again to my wonderful co-hosts who keep me on my toes and keep me organized. And also for Melanie, who always joins us, but she's not always able to get here throughout, but she's always there to support. So thank you to you too. So I'm going to say fare thee well. Have an absolutely wonderful evening and afternoon or morning, wherever it is you are. And Adam, if you could just stay on afterwards for 2 minutes, that would be awesome.
Great.
But anyway, yeah. But I will say farewell to you all and goodbye.
Bye.